I never thought peace could be so fragile. One moment, the morning was quiet, the kind of stillness you earn after years of hearing explosions instead of birds. The next, it shattered with a sound that didn't belong. A hiss, sharp and chemical, followed by my service dog's scream. Teddy staggered backward, pawing at his face, eyes wide, whimpering in confusion. My brain didn't process it as a neighborly dispute. It processed it as an attack. My body locked into the same mode it had in the desert, calm, efficient, dangerous. Before we move forward, comment down from where you're watching right now. The woman standing there was HOA Karen, the self-appointed queen of our beige little kingdom. She wasn't just angry, she was triumphant, clutching a small silver canister like a trophy. Her voice was the sharp tone of someone who'd never been told no long enough to forget how it sounds. "That mutt barked at me," she snapped, her visor shadowing her eyes. "You people think you're above the rules." My jaw tightened, and my training did the rest. Slow breath in through the nose, out through the mouth, eyes locked. The canister was still dripping from her fingers. "He's a federally protected service animal," I said quietly. "And what you just did may be a federal crime." She smirked, dismissive, like laws were HOA guidelines she could rewrite. That was her first mistake. Teddy whimpered behind me, his head pressed against my knee. I could smell the burning citrus scent. Citronella, maybe, or something worse. The neighbors had started peeking out from their blinds, drawn by the sound, but no one stepped closer. That's the power HOA Karen had. She'd spent years training them to stay quiet. I knelt beside Teddy, wiping his eyes with the saline solution I carried everywhere. His tail thumped once against the concrete, trying to tell me he was okay. He wasn't. Neither was I. Karen's voice cut through the quiet again, shrill and righteous. "Dogs like that shouldn't be allowed in our community. It's a disturbance." My mind logged every word, every syllable, every witness who might pretend they hadn't seen what they just saw. I wasn't looking at a neighbor. I was looking at a suspect. "You don't get to decide that," I said. My tone was calm, level, and it made her flinch. "That's federal jurisdiction." She blinked, confused for half a second, the kind of confusion that only happens when someone realizes they've stepped onto a battlefield they didn't understand. The two police officers who'd been idling at the far end of the block turned toward the commotion. I raised a hand, not in anger, just authority. "Gentlemen," I said, "you might want to document this." HOA. Karen turned on them instantly. "He can't control that animal. It lunged at me." Lies rolled off her tongue like she'd rehearsed them in the mirror. I didn't bother arguing. I just opened my phone, hit, record, and panned slowly. Her, the canister, Teddy, the officers. "For the record," I said into the camera, "this is an ADA-protected service animal. Any act of harassment, harm, or interference is a federal violation under Title II, Section 2132 of the Americans with Disabilities Act." Her face drained of color for the first time. "You think you can intimidate me with your fancy laws?" she spat. "No," I said, voice flat as a rifle barrel. "The law will handle that." The officers exchanged looks, realizing this wasn't just another neighborhood argument. One of them radioed for animal control, standard protocol, but his tone carried something else. Hesitation. They knew who she was, and they knew I wasn't backing down. Karen folded her arms, chin lifted high. "This community has rules," she said again, as if repetition would make it true. "Yes," I replied. "So does the United States Code." The chemical stench in the air was still thick. Teddy blinked rapidly, but he was settling. Breathing steady, posture returning. I could feel the adrenaline flattening my senses, making everything sharp, the glint of her canister, the sunlight bouncing off the squad car's chrome, the way her fingers trembled just enough to betray that her confidence was cracking. "You think your little uniform past makes you special?" she hissed. "You think that dog gives you a free pass?" I didn't move. "No," I said. "It gives me a duty." She stepped closer, invading the space between us like a challenge, her perfume mixed with the lingering bite of chemical spray, an ugly, synthetic blend of ego and ignorance. "You're finished here," she said softly, like it was a promise. "I'll see to it personally." I stared right back, no anger, no tremor, just truth. "So will the Department of Justice." That stopped her, not because she understood it, because deep down, she didn't. HOA Karen believed power was proximity. The closer she stood to your front lawn, the more she owned it. She'd never had someone push back with actual authority. Her world was one of citations, fines, and gossip chains. Mine was built on law, evidence, and chain of command. Two systems colliding in a suburban cul-de-sac. The officers took statements. One noted the canister. I logged the time, the witnesses, the temperature, and the light conditions. Old habits. Evidence isn't collected later. It's preserved in real time. Karen was already retreating toward her house, muttering about dangerous animals and community safety. She slammed the door. I looked down at Teddy. His breathing had steadied, but his eyes told the story. Confusion. Pain. Loyalty. "We're okay," I murmured, hand resting on his neck. "We're okay for now." I stood there on that sun-bleached sidewalk, surrounded by neat lawns and plastic flags fluttering in the breeze, and realized something. She didn't just spray my dog. She sprayed the one part of me that still believed peace could exist here. That was gone now. She'd crossed a federal line, and whether she knew it or not, she'd started a war. Because here's what HOA Karen didn't understand. Some of us stopped fighting battles years ago. But we never forgot how. Most people in that neighborhood thought I was just another quiet man with a golden retriever and too much time on his hands. They had no idea who I used to be or what that dog really meant. Before HOA Karen's little empire of rules and flower beds, I spent 20 years in places where silence could kill you. I handled dogs who could sniff out explosives under 3 feet of sand. I watched soldiers trust them with their lives, and I learned early that loyalty doesn't come from orders. It comes from love and duty. When I retired, I didn't bring much home except scars, a few medals, and the sound of things that don't go quiet even when the guns stop. The VA called it residual trauma. I called it noise. Teddy was the cure. Before we move forward, comment down from where you're watching right now. I got Teddy through a federal service program. Task-trained, certified under the ADA, logged by serial number and chip. There's a registry at the Department of Justice that could pull his record faster than any HOA could file a complaint. His vest isn't decoration, it's clearance. He's allowed anywhere I am. He's my stabilizer when the world gets loud. But to HOA Karen, he was just another rule she could twist. When I moved to Greenfield Meadows, I thought I'd found quiet. I bought the house cash, on the edge of the subdivision, near a small park with a flagpole that caught morning light. The first week, I trimmed my hedges to regulation height, painted my mailbox beige like the bylaws required, and nodded politely to anyone who waved. I didn't need friends. I needed peace. And for a while, I had it. Until HOA Karen introduced herself. She came down the driveway holding a clipboard like it was a badge. "Mr. Dalton," she said, smiling in that brittle way people do when they've already decided they don't like you. "Welcome to our community. I trust you've read the handbook." I had. Twice. She pointed to Teddy sitting calmly beside me. "We have noise standards," she said. Pets can't bark excessively. I told her Teddy wasn't a pet. He's a service dog. She blinked, then scribbled something on her pad. Service dogs still fall under the animal guidelines. I smiled faintly. Not under federal law. That was the first time she heard the word federal in my voice. It wouldn't be the last. For the next 6 months, I kept to myself. I mowed my lawn to regulation height, paid the dues, nodded at the board meetings. Teddy learned the sound of the mail truck, the kids on bikes, the neighbors' wind chimes. The routine was steady, predictable. It helped. Until HOA Karen decided peace wasn't profitable. Every HOA president has a type. Hers was control. She was 52, hair the color of entitlement, visor glued to her forehead like a crown. She'd been on the board for 12 years and had built an empire of intimidation. Small fines, citations, veiled threats in pastel envelopes. People feared her more than they respected her. She ran the neighborhood like a base commander without the courage to serve. Her husband had left years ago, but she still wore the ring. Power armor in suburbia. Every neighbor complaint flowed through her inbox. Every landscaping permit had to pass her signature. And she had a history of targeting anyone who didn't fall in line. The Millers for painting their shutters the wrong shade of beige. The Cunninghams for building a ramp for their disabled son without prior approval. She fined them for aesthetic disruption. They paid because fighting meant fees, lawyers, and public embarrassment. HOA Karen's greatest weapon wasn't her authority, it was exhaustion. She made people too tired to resist. But I was built for resistance. The first official warning came by mail. 1 page, typed, dated, signed, dog disturbance violation. Multiple complaints received. It said Teddy barked incessantly, which was interesting because Teddy hardly made a sound unless he sensed distress. I knew exactly where it came from. She'd filed it herself. I took the letter, scanned it, and uploaded it to my encrypted drive. Paper trails win wars. 2 weeks later, a second letter arrived. Final warning before fine issuance. I called the HOA office. Her voice answered, saccharine sweet. Oh, Mr. Dalton, we've had multiple reports. From who? I asked. Anonymous, she said. Like that meant legitimate. Anonymous reports don't justify penalties, I said. Under the Fair Housing Act, you're walking a fine line. Silence. Then the faint scratch of her pen. We'll review that, she said, voice cooling. She never expected pushback in her own language. Policy, statute, code. I'd read the entire HOA charter the night I moved in. There was no clause that outranked federal disability law. I filed a written rebuttal citing ADA Section 35.136, paragraph, I'm B. Individuals with disabilities shall be permitted to be accompanied by their service animals in all areas of public accommodation. It wasn't just my right, it was federal mandate. I copied the city council, the local police chief, and the county clerk. Within a day, she called me directly. You didn't have to escalate, she said. We could have discussed this neighbor to neighbor. I don't discuss my civil rights, I replied. I enforce them. She hung up without another word. That was the start of her obsession. She began patrolling past my property daily, clipboard always in hand, her little army of board members trailing behind. They measured fence lines, photographed mailboxes, logged imaginary infractions. I kept logs, too. Timestamps, dates, photos of her standing on my curb, watching. I wasn't paranoid. I was preparing. In my world, evidence is the only armor that matters. The day she sprayed Teddy wasn't random. It was the culmination. She'd been looking for a trigger, a way to break through the legal shield she couldn't penetrate. The bark after that backfire gave her the excuse. But what she didn't know was that my past had trained me to fight enemies who hid behind bureaucracy better than she ever could. When you serve long enough, you stop relying on emotion. You rely on systems, rules, codes, command chains. Civilian life hadn't erased that. I'd built redundancies into my life. Dashcam running every drive, body cam on the porch, digital backups off-site. So when she made her move, everything recorded automatically. The footage, the sound, the time of day. It was all there. And that's what gave me power. Not anger. Not revenge. Documentation. Neighbors whispered that week. Some thought I'd overreacted. Others crossed the street to avoid me. That's how fear works. It spreads faster than truth. HOA Karen counted on it. She'd done this before. The Cunninghams had moved away 2 years prior, their house foreclosed after a string of safety violations. The old widow at 214 Willow sold her home after 3 months of harassment over yard clutter. Karen turned the HOA's bylaws into a weapon of social cleansing. Remove the inconvenient, reward the obedient. But she made a fatal mistake. She picked the one neighbor who didn't scare easy. I kept a notebook labeled Case File, HOA Incidents. Every entry dated, annotated, cross-referenced with photos. I didn't plan revenge. I planned procedure. I researched federal statutes, local precedents, court rulings, and property law exceptions. You don't fight an HOA with emotion. You fight it with paper. And mine was already thicker than her binder of violations. The day after the spray attack, I spent the night reading Title 42 of the U.S. Code until dawn. My dog lay beside me, eyes heavy but calm. Every line of law I read turned fury into focus. I wasn't just defending my dog, I was preparing to expose something much bigger. An HOA president who thought her personal biases outweighed federal law. And in my world, that's not just arrogance, that's treason against justice itself. By sunrise, I had a new mission. She wanted to test my patience. I was about to test her limits. Power doesn't always announce itself with sirens and badges. Sometimes it hides in meeting minutes and landscaping memos. HOA Karen's authority came wrapped in paperwork and fear. She wasn't just the president of Greenfield Meadows. She was the system. She had the signatures, the votes, and the loyalty of 3 board members who owed her too much to say no. The bylaws were her scripture, the violation notices her commandments, and she wielded them like a zealot. I learned how deep her web ran the week after the attack. The same morning I filed my ADA complaint, she held an emergency HOA board meeting. The notice was tucked under my doormat. Backdated, of course. According to the minutes, the purpose was to address escalating behavioral issues related to a community animal. I wasn't invited, but I didn't need to be. One of the newer residents, a nervous accountant named Tim, recorded part of it on his phone. When he sent it to me anonymously that night, I listened twice. Karen's voice was sharp, precise, dripping with false concern. "We must consider the safety of our residents," she said. "This individual has demonstrated aggression. His dog poses a liability." Another voice, probably board member Harris, asked, "He's a veteran, right?" Karen didn't hesitate. "Exactly. You know how unstable those cases can be." Before we move forward, comment down from where you're watching right now. That one line told me everything. She wasn't just abusing power. She was weaponizing stigma. She was taking the word veteran and twisting it into threat. That's when I realized this wasn't about a dog anymore. This was about control. Karen's power wasn't accidental. Her cousin, Deputy Miller, was the same officer who responded that day. Small-town nepotism. The kind that's invisible until you challenge it. Her brother-in-law worked in the county clerk's office, and her best friend sat on the property management committee that handled HOA arbitration. Every route of appeal curved back to her. She'd built a fortress, one that could crush dissent with bureaucracy. But I'd lived inside real command structures, the kind where corruption meant lives lost. I knew the signs, the shifting allegiances, the subtle language of people covering for each other. Karen's system worked like a cartel. She kept her subordinates loyal through favors. She'd arrange for fines to be forgotten or ensure their properties passed inspection early. In return, they attended every meeting, voted in lockstep, and pretended her cruelty was just policy. One of her longest-running victims was a retired teacher named Mrs. Gable. Sweet woman, kept her garden immaculate. 2 years back, she added a small wooden trellis without submitting the architectural request form. Karen fined her $250 and threatened to sue when she hesitated to pay. Eventually, Mrs. Gable caved, sold her car to cover the escalating penalties, and still flinched every time Karen's name came up. Fear is contagious, and Karen infected the whole neighborhood. Her corruption didn't stop at fines. She had a side arrangement with a local contractor, the same one who won every HOA landscaping bid. He'd overcharge by 20% and kick back the difference under consulting fees. It wasn't speculation. I had proof. One of the invoices was accidentally delivered to my mailbox, addressed to Karen's house, with the contractor's name scribbled across the back. I scanned it, filed it under Evidence 4A. In the following weeks, I started to understand her pattern. She targeted veterans, single parents, and retirees, the ones least likely to fight back or afford legal counsel. Her goal wasn't money alone. It was dominance. Every check, every apology letter was a victory. Every silence from the rest of us was validation. I started mapping her structure the way I'd map an insurgent network. Core node, supporting assets, communication routes. Karen was the command node. Harris and Bloom, her board allies, were logistics. Duke, the loud neighbor who never met a rumor he didn't spread, was psychological operations. The HOA's official email list was her propaganda channel. Every complaint, every whisper started with her, traveled through them, and ended up in a letter with an official seal. The deeper I looked, the clearer it became. She'd been violating federal and state fair housing laws for years. The Fair Housing Amendments Act of 1988 prohibits discrimination against individuals with disabilities, including the use of service animals. Section 818 even classifies harassment or interference as an enforceable offense. She wasn't just being cruel, she was breaking laws written decades before she ever chaired her first meeting. When I called the state HOA ombudsman's office, the woman on the line sighed. "Greenfield Meadows again?" she asked. That tone, resigned, exhausted, told me everything. I wasn't her first call about HOA Karen. "We've received similar complaints," the clerk said, "but without witnesses willing to testify, our hands are tied." Witnesses. That was Karen's shield. No one wanted to lose their homes or deal with retaliatory fines. It wasn't fear of her personally. It was fear of her reach. She'd turned the HOA into a private surveillance state. She had eyes everywhere. Committee members, nosy neighbors, even maintenance workers who'd report anything unusual. So I flipped the tactic. I became the quiet watcher. Every time she patrolled, I logged her route. Every notice she posted, I photographed before removing it. Every board update email I saved as PDF, metadata intact. I wasn't just gathering information. I was constructing a case file that could bury her. Karen held her next meeting at the clubhouse 2 weeks later. Same day I submitted my ADA complaint to the Department of Justice. Her agenda looked harmless. Community safety enhancements. I attended, front row, silent. She opened the meeting with her usual smile. White teeth, pink gloss, shark's patience. "Before we begin," she said, "I want to thank everyone for maintaining our community's high standards. However, we have an ongoing issue with compliance." Her eyes flicked to me. "Certain residents believe rules don't apply to them." The room went still. I didn't move, didn't blink, just stared. She expected me to interrupt, to feed her narrative. I let her talk. Every lie she told that night was recorded on my phone, clear audio, time-stamped. She motioned for a vote to increase penalties for animal-related disturbances. The motion passed, 3-1. Her empire reaffirmed. But as I left the room, I saw something in her eyes. Awareness. She knew I wasn't just another neighbor anymore. I was watching back. That's when she escalated. HOA Karen started contacting local law enforcement directly. False reports about a dangerous dog. Requests for welfare checks. Each one left a digital footprint. Each one logged. She was trying to create a paper trail that painted me as unstable. It was psychological warfare wrapped in homeowner policy. And I'd seen that tactic before, in interrogation rooms overseas, in power plays meant to break resolve. But she underestimated how much training carries over from a life of command. You don't rattle a man who's already lived through worse. You document, you adapt, you wait. By then, I knew her weak points. She craved public validation but feared legal exposure. She thrived on control but collapsed under scrutiny. And she'd just walked into my jurisdiction, the one governed not by HOA codes, but by federal law. When her next violation letter arrived, accusing Teddy of aggressive posture toward residents, I filed it under Evidence 9C. I cross-referenced every timestamp with my security footage. No incident, no contact, nothing. Then I attached both the letter and the video to my DOJ complaint. Facts win wars. Karen's kingdom was built on fear, but I was dismantling it one documented lie at a time. She didn't realize it yet, but her reign was already over. She'd spent years weaponizing paperwork. I was about to weaponize the law. The morning after that last board meeting, I stopped feeling angry and started feeling operational. Anger burns hot, precision cuts cold. I'd been patient, but now the investigation had a name, a structure, and a timetable. HO Karen wanted this to stay small, just another neighborhood spat buried in red tape. But once you involve a federally protected service animal, the law stops being optional. I began with the basics. Jurisdiction. The ADA wasn't just a civil statute. It carried federal authority. Title II of the Americans with Disabilities Act, Section 12132, explicitly prohibits discrimination by any public or quasi-public entity. HOA boards qualify when they enforce housing standards that affect disabled residents. I printed the statute in bold, double-spaced text and pinned it above my desk. Every operation needs a mission objective. That was mine. Before we move forward, comment down from where you're watching right now. Next came evidence recovery. I pulled every clip from my home security system. Angle, date, timestamp. The footage of HOA Karen spraying Teddy was there in perfect clarity. Her hand raised, the silver canister glinting in sunlight, the mist hitting his face. I slowed it down frame by frame, capturing stills of her expression. The smirk before the act, the self-satisfaction after. Evidence is storytelling for the courtroom. Every image has to speak louder than excuses. Then I compiled witness statements. The Millers next door didn't want to get involved, but Mrs. Gable, sweet, terrified Mrs. Gable, handed me a slip of paper with trembling hands. "I saw her do it," she whispered. "You didn't imagine it." Her courage cost her. Karen fined her the next day for yard ornament violations. That fine became Exhibit B. Retaliation is a pattern, and patterns prove motive. From there, I went higher. The County Animal Control Office logs every complaint, and with the right phrasing, they'll share publicly accessible records. I submitted a formal records request under the Freedom of Information Act, citing local transparency laws. 3 days later, the file arrived. 6 complaints from HOA Karen over the last year, all targeting residents with dogs, all dismissed for lack of evidence. Her obsession was systemic. That file went into my binder, tabbed Federal Trail, open source intel. The next layer was internal HOA correspondence. I knew she conducted business through the official HOA Gmail account, standard practice for neighborhood management groups. What most people don't know is that HOA emails qualify as records subject to subpoena if they involve discriminatory enforcement. But subpoenas take time, and I didn't have weeks, so I called Marcus. Marcus had been my signal intelligence guy overseas. Back then, he could trace an insurgent's burner phone through 3 countries using a satellite feed and a half-dead battery. These days, he ran cybersecurity for a major contractor. I told him what was happening, every detail. There was a pause, then a low whistle. "You're kidding me," he said. "A local HOA president spraying a service dog? You know that's a Title 18 violation, right?" "I know," I said. "I need a clean look inside their communications." He sighed. "You still have that old secure drive I gave you?" "Always." "Good. I'll set up a packet sniffer to trace their outbound mail domain. Give me 48 hours. That's how the operation started. While Marcus did his part, I built mine. I documented Teddy's condition. The veterinarian's report confirmed ocular irritation consistent with chemical exposure. We cross-referenced it with the compound analysis from the evidence canister, capsaicin derivative, not citronella. Capsaicin is regulated under the Federal Hazardous Substances Act. That detail alone turned HOA Karen's mistake into criminal assault on a service animal, a federal felony under 18 U.S.C., paragraph 13-68. I contacted the ADA Regional Enforcement Office in Atlanta. The woman on the line spoke with the calm tone of someone who'd heard every excuse in the book. "Mr. Dalton," she said, "if what you're describing is accurate, that HOA has violated both Title II and the Fair Housing Amendments Act. We'll need formal affidavits and evidence." "I'll send it today," I said. "Make sure you include your service animal certification and any documentation of retaliation," she added. "We can refer it directly to the Department of Justice's Civil Rights Division." That was the moment the game changed. HOA Karen thought she was fighting a neighbor. She was about to fight the federal government. By the second week, Marcus called with results. "They're sloppy," he said, amusement creeping into his tone. "Their website admin account still uses Meadows223 as a password. I didn't even have to crack anything." "What did you find?" "Oh, you're going to love this. Email from HOA Karen to her board, time-stamped 1 day after the incident. Quote, "We need to document Mr. Dalton's dog as a public threat. Prepare a witness statement." She even attached a draft report for her assistant to sign. Her assistant's name? Sarah Peters. Looks like she handles admin tasks, meeting minutes, complaint filings, that kind of thing. "Forward everything," I said. He did. The email thread was damning. Internal coordination, false witness creation, attempts to manipulate animal control. It wasn't incompetence, it was conspiracy. I printed every message, highlighted the key phrases, and placed them in chronological order. The paper stack was growing heavy, thick with proof. Every page was another nail in the coffin of her presidency. But evidence isn't power unless you know how to use it. So I reached out to a contact from my old life, staff sergeant turned paralegal, name withheld, now working with the Veterans Legal Defense Network. I sent him a summary. His reply came an hour later. "Jack, this is textbook discrimination. You've got ADA, FHA, and criminal interference. Build your chain of custody, then go public. They'll fold." Public. That word stuck. HOA Karen thrived in shadows, behind closed doors and boardroom whispers. She feared exposure more than punishment. I realized the most effective weapon wasn't silence or lawsuits. It was light. I started recording everything, each interaction, each patrol, each threat. I kept a body cam clipped under my jacket, linked to a cloud backup Marcus set up on a remote server. She couldn't erase what was already mirrored across 3 encrypted nodes. A week later, Animal Control returned. Same officer, Ruiz. His expression told me he didn't want to be there. "Mr. Dalton," he said, "we received another complaint. Your dog allegedly growled at a child." "There was no child," I said. He shrugged, apologetic. "I have to follow procedure." I nodded. "Then you'll want to record this." I handed him a printed copy of the emails. Marcus recovered. He read the first line. His eyebrows lifted. "Where did you get these?" "Public source," I said smoothly. "But you'll want to verify the headers. The sender's domain matches the HOA account." He scanned the attachments silently. "This looks bad," he said finally. "It is bad," I replied, "and it's already in the hands of the Department of Justice." That was half true. I'd filed the formal complaint online, but the case was still under review. Still, the bluff worked. Ruiz's posture changed. He went from reluctant bureaucrat to cautious professional. "I'll document this," he said. When he left, I watched his van drive off and knew Karen would hear about it within the hour. Let her. Fear works both ways. Marcus called again that night. "You stirred the hornet's nest," he said. "They're panicking, deleted half their correspondence, switched to personal emails." "That's fine," I said. "I already have enough." He paused. "You going public?" "Not yet. First, I want her to incriminate herself in front of witnesses." "How?" "Simple," I said. "She loves meetings." I drafted a formal request under the HOA charter demanding an open hearing to review her aggressive conduct toward a disabled resident. She couldn't refuse without appearing guilty. The email circulated through the neighborhood faster than gossip, and by that weekend, the clubhouse was standing room only. Karen walked in late, chin high, eyes blazing. "This is harassment," she hissed. "This is procedure," I said calmly. "I'm invoking Section 5.3 of the HOA bylaws, public disciplinary review." The crowd murmured. The rules were her weapon. Now they were mine. She opened her mouth to protest, but I laid a stack of documents on the table. Emails, FOIA reports, veterinary records, witness statements. "Before you accuse me again," I said, "these are certified copies submitted to the Department of Justice Civil Rights Division." The silence that followed was surgical, the sound of power realizing it's cornered. She reached for her water bottle, hand shaking. "You can't prove those are real." Marcus's voice rang from the back of the room. "You might want to check your sent folder before saying that, ma'am." She spun around, eyes wide. He smiled faintly. "Cybersecurity audit consultant," he said, showing his badge. "Nice to meet you." Her face drained of color. I turned to the crowd. "This isn't about noise. This is about power abused. The law is clear. Interfering with a service animal is a federal crime. So is falsifying evidence and filing fraudulent reports. We're done being afraid of clipboards." That meeting ended in chaos, half the room shouting, the other half filming. Karen fled before it adjourned, but the damage was irreversible. By dawn, clips of her outburst were online, courtesy of Marcus's live feed. Hundreds of views turned to thousands overnight. The hashtags wrote themselves. Justice for Teddy. Hoatirent. The next morning, the HOA's management company called me personally. "Mr. Dalton," the regional director said, voice careful, "we're launching an internal review. The board's authority is temporarily suspended pending legal consultation." Translation. They'd seen the video and wanted distance from the wreckage. The same day, I received an email from the Department of Justice acknowledging my complaint had been escalated to federal review. Attached was a reference code and contact for the ADA enforcement attorney assigned to the case. Momentum was shifting. That night, I sat on my porch with Teddy at my feet, watching sprinklers arc across the lawns. For the first time since the attack, the neighborhood was quiet. Not peaceful, tense quiet. People were talking behind doors, recalculating loyalties. HOA Karen's fortress was cracking, and all I had done was follow the rules she thought she owned. What she didn't understand was that law isn't a leash. It's a weapon when you know how to wield it. You can always tell when a tyrant feels power slipping. They don't go quiet. They get louder. Within 48 hours of the public meeting, HOA Karen went from smug to frantic. The woman who once strutted down our cul-de-sac with her clipboard now sent proxies, board members, maintenance workers, even teenagers, to do her bidding. Flyers appeared on mailboxes warning of unregistered animals and safety hazards. Every house except mine. That was her message. You're not part of this community anymore. But I'd been exiled before, in worse places, under harsher rules. Isolation doesn't scare me. It sharpens me. Before we move forward, comment down from where you're watching right now. The next escalation came wrapped in official letterhead. An HOA violation summary citing Section 14.3, endangerment of residents through animal aggression. Below it, a fine, $1,000, and a note threatening foreclosure for non-payment. They'd gone nuclear. But paperwork is just ammunition, and I'd already built stronger armor. I scanned it, logged it under Evidence 12F, and sent a copy to the DOJ case officer. 2 days later, my phone buzzed with a new message. Animal control hearing scheduled for review. Emergency order petition filed. Attached was the PDF of a sworn statement from a witness named Sarah Peters, claiming Teddy bit a child. Same false story Karen tried to sell weeks ago, but this time she'd put it in writing under oath. That's not a violation. It's perjury. I read the report 3 times, noting timestamps, phrasing, syntax. The writing wasn't Sarah's, it was Karen's. The same clipped, officious tone from every HOA email. That meant one thing. Sarah was being coerced. The next morning, I saw Sarah watering plants in Karen's yard. Her posture told me everything. Head down, movements rushed, nervous glances toward the window. She wasn't complicit. She was trapped. So I waited. When she left for her car, I walked across the street. "Sarah," I said softly. She froze. "You don't have to be afraid." Her eyes flicked toward Karen's window. "You don't understand," she whispered. "She controls everything." "I understand perfectly," I said. "But she's not the law, and the people who are the law are already watching." That afternoon, I filed a motion with the ADA Enforcement Division attaching the false affidavit. They responded within hours. Formal notice that federal investigators would be reviewing the complaint for criminal interference. It was no longer civil. It was criminal. And HOA Karen had just crossed the federal line. She didn't know it yet. By the end of the week, news spread beyond our neighborhood. Local journalists caught wind of the viral clip Marcus uploaded. The HOA president accused of spraying a veteran service dog. The video had over 50,000 views now. They camped outside the subdivision entrance, waiting for quotes. Residents started whispering. The same people who'd once avoided eye contact now approached me cautiously, offering support, half-whispered apologies. "We didn't know, Jack. We just wanted to stay out of trouble." Fear was evaporating, replaced by outrage. Karen responded the only way she knew how, with more control. She called an emergency meeting at the clubhouse. I attended, uninvited, sitting dead center, body cam rolling. She opened the meeting like she always did, with fake calm. "There's been misinformation spread online," she said. "Our HOA has always acted in the community's best interest." Her voice wavered slightly on best. Certain individuals, she continued, have chosen to escalate private matters into public spectacle. I raised my hand. Certain individuals sprayed a service animal in violation of federal law, I said evenly. Her eyes snapped toward me. Mr. Dalton, you're out of order. I'm perfectly in order, I replied. Section 5.7 of the HOA Charter allows open comment during general assemblies. I'm exercising that right. The room murmured. Neighbors glancing between us. I saw cracks forming in her support. Her allies on the board shifted uncomfortably. They knew what was coming. I stood. Calm, deliberate, no emotion in my voice. For everyone here who hasn't seen the video, it's evidence, not rumor. For those who don't know the law, Title 18 of the U.S. Code makes it a federal crime to harm, harass, or interfere with a service animal. Maximum penalty, 10 years in prison. She slammed her gavel. This meeting is adjourned. Not quite, I said, placing my phone on the table. It's live streaming again. A collective gasp. Several residents pulled out their phones, confirming it. The live stream had thousands of viewers already. The comments rolled fast. Expose her. Justice for Teddy. Karen's facade cracked completely. You can't do this. I can, I said. It's a public meeting under the HOA's own charter. Everything you say is part of the record. She tried to walk out. Marcus blocked the exit, polite but firm. Ma'am, I'd recommend staying. Transparency looks better on camera. Her allies didn't follow her this time. They stayed seated, silent, abandoning her mid-retreat. The Queen was alone. Within 24 hours, the management company severed ties with the HOA. Their statement cited legal liability concerns and reputational damage. Translation: she was radioactive. But it didn't end there. The next morning, my front yard was vandalized. Spray paint, red X's across the fence, the word liar scrawled in dripping letters. I reviewed the camera footage. 2 silhouettes, one matching Duke's build, the other smaller, female, possibly Karen herself. She was escalating to intimidation tactics now. I didn't call the police. I called the DOJ case officer. He answered on the second ring. Mr. Dalton, he said, we're aware of developments. The ADA Enforcement Branch has elevated your case to the Civil Rights Division. They're coordinating with local law enforcement. Expect contact soon. An hour later, 2 federal investigators arrived. Plain clothes, badges clipped to belts. They took statements, photographed the vandalism, and collected the evidence canister from my freezer storage. The senior agent, Ramirez, flipped through my binder. You were military, he said, recognizing the structure of my logs. Yes, sir, I said. He nodded approvingly. You built a cleaner case file than most detectives. Force of habit, I said. He smiled faintly. We'll be in touch soon. Don't engage with her anymore. She's unraveling. He was right. HOA Karen wasn't sleeping. I saw lights on in her house at 2 a.m., blinds twitching, her SUV gone for hours at night. She'd gone from predator to prey in record time. But paranoia is dangerous. It makes people desperate. That desperation exploded 3 nights later. It was past midnight when my security system pinged an alert, motion at the front gate. I checked the live feed, 2 figures, flashlights, clipboards, voices hushed but frantic. I slipped on a jacket, stepped outside quietly, and caught them mid-act, posting new ordinance notices on residents' doors. Karen's voice, low and shaking. Get them all up, every house, before morning. I stepped into the light. Evening. They froze. One of them, the pool committee woman, stammered something about routine postings. I held up my phone, recording. You're violating the HOA charter again. No night postings without quorum approval. Karen turned slowly, her face pale, hollow. You think you've won, don't you? She hissed. I think you've lost, said. And the law agrees. She lunged forward, snatching the flyer from her aide's hand. You ruined my life. You did that yourself, I said quietly. You sprayed a service dog, fabricated evidence, and lied under oath. That's not my doing, that's yours. For the first time, she didn't have words. Her mouth opened, then closed. The flashlight trembled in her grip. I could see it, realization dawning behind the rage. The empire was gone. By dawn, her last allies had resigned. The board disbanded temporarily, pending investigation. The management company issued a cease operation notice. HOA Karen was alone, stripped of title and leverage, waiting for the federal letter she knew was coming. And it came. 2 weeks later, a certified envelope landed on her porch. I watched from my window as she picked it up, eyes scanning the Department of Justice seal. Her knees buckled slightly. She staggered inside, door slamming shut behind her. By sunset, a moving truck was parked out front. The visor, the clipboard, the pastel skirts, all packed away. But her departure didn't end the storm. The media descended again, this time armed with DOJ statements. Federal investigation launched into HOA abuse, the headline read. My phone buzzed non-stop, journalists, advocates, even other veterans reaching out. People wanted a symbol, a story that proved you could fight back and win. Yet I didn't feel triumphant, not yet. Teddy sat beside me, calm as ever, tail thumping once in steady rhythm. His eyes asked what I was thinking. Is it really over? Not until the court said so. A month later, I got the call. Mr. Dalton, Ramirez said, the U.S. Attorney's Office has accepted the case. Charges are being filed, false reporting, animal cruelty, harassment under ADA jurisdiction. We'll need you for testimony. Understood, I said. He hesitated. They're also recommending restitution and permanent removal from any governing position within an HOA. Justice, I thought, doesn't always roar. Sometimes it arrives with a signature. When the trial date was announced, the courtroom was packed. Reporters, residents, veterans groups, all waiting. HOA Karen entered pale, diminished, her lawyer whispering frantically. When the prosecution displayed the footage, her spraying Teddy, the follow-up emails, the falsified affidavit, the room went silent. I watched her expression shift from defiance to resignation as each exhibit landed like a hammer blow. Then came Sarah's testimony. She told the truth, how Karen coerced her, threatened her job, and forced her to sign lies. Every word struck harder than any verdict could. When it was over, the judge didn't even deliberate. The court finds the defendant guilty, he said, voice cold and even. This was not ignorance. This was abuse of authority. Karen didn't cry. She just stared down at her shaking hands as the gavel fell. I left the courthouse with Teddy, at my side. Cameras flashed, microphones thrust forward, but I said nothing. The victory wasn't about noise, it was about silence, the kind that returns when justice restores what fear tried to erase. And for the first time in a long time, that silence felt earned. Some people think revenge is about anger. It's not. It's about precision, about watching the same system that tried to bury you become your weapon instead. HOA. Karen thought she was untouchable, that a board title made her immune to consequence. She'd never met someone who knew how to use the law like ordnance-level artillery. This wasn't vengeance anymore. This was an operation. After the verdict, I didn't rest. I filed a secondary civil claim through the Veterans Legal Defense Network, citing emotional distress, defamation, and violation of federal disability protections. It wasn't about money, it was about principle. Every claim, every affidavit, every exhibit was a nail sealing the coffin of her empire. My case wasn't just against her. It was against everything she represented: unchecked authority, fear-based leadership, and the illusion of control. Before we move forward, comment down from where you're watching right now. While my lawyer prepared the filings, Marcus and I built something else, a public data log. Every record, every piece of evidence, time-stamped, cataloged, and uploaded for transparency. We redacted private addresses, but left the facts untouched. Within days, it was trending. Other homeowners came forward. Stories poured in from across the country. Veterans fined for wheelchairs on porches, service dogs banned from pools, disabled residents threatened with eviction. The pattern wasn't isolated, it was systemic. That's when federal eyes widened. The Department of Housing and Urban Development contacted me directly. They were opening a regional audit on HOA compliance with ADA and fair housing laws. Greenfield Meadows became the case study. HOA Karen had thought she ruled a neighborhood. She'd just triggered federal reform. Meanwhile, the local management company issued a public apology. "We regret the misconduct and failure to oversee board compliance with federal law," their lawyer called privately. "Mr. Dalton, we're negotiating settlement terms," he said. "We're prepared to pay damages and cover legal costs in exchange for non-disclosure." I refused. "Transparency," I said. "Every line stays public." Silence on the other end. He knew he couldn't buy me. That call alone was worth more than any payout. Karen's name became shorthand for abuse of power. Local news ran weekly updates. HOA Karen scandal sparks legislative review. The county board drafted new provisions limiting HOA authority over service animals and disabled residents. It was small, but it was progress. Then the federal restitution order arrived. The judge's tone in writing was as cold as his gavel in court. "The defendant is hereby ordered to pay $75,000 in compensatory damages, complete 500 hours of community service at a service animal training program, and is barred from any governance or enforcement role in a homeowners association for life." Justice doesn't always roar. Sometimes it writes your enemy's future in ink. But I wasn't finished. I wanted the system fixed, not just the person punished. So I met with ADA enforcement attorneys and HUD compliance officers to create what we called the Greenfield Protocol, a step-by-step model for residents to defend themselves from HOA overreach. The outline was military simple. Documentation, escalation, exposure. Within a month, it became a downloadable guide shared in veteran circles and homeowner forums nationwide. I didn't just win a case, I built a manual. Back home, change swept the street. The HOA was dissolved entirely. In its place, the city appointed a temporary trustee panel overseen by an independent law firm. The bylaws were rewritten from scratch, with federal oversight clauses. This time, no single name held unchecked power, and for once, the neighbors weren't afraid. Mrs. Gable started planting roses again. The Millers, once too scared to help, organized a community cleanup. Even Duke, the man who once called Teddy a beast, walked over one morning with a bag of biscuits. "He's a good dog," he muttered. Teddy wagged his tail and accepted the peace offering without hesitation. But the moment that sealed everything came weeks later, when I received a call from Agent Ramirez. "Jack," he said, his voice lighter this time. "Your case triggered internal reviews. We've identified 6 other HOAs in violation of ADA statutes across the state. You lit a fire." "Good," I said. "Let it burn." He chuckled. "Funny thing, our director wants you to consult. Not officially, but as a subject matter expert. Real-world application." "Consult?" "Training sessions for enforcement officers," he said. "How to identify abuse patterns in HOA complaints. You up for that?" I looked down at Teddy, asleep at my feet, his golden fur rising and falling with each steady breath. "Yeah," I said quietly. I'm up for it. The first time I stood in front of those agents, I didn't see suits. I saw soldiers, different uniforms, same mission. I walked them through the chain of evidence, how civilian power structures can become petty dictatorships, how to use federal law as a scalpel instead of a club. Every nod in that room meant another layer of armor for people like me, for veterans, for anyone silenced by bureaucracy. And then came the message from Sarah Peters. The woman who'd once been too afraid to speak now worked for a non-profit helping whistleblowers and service animal handlers. She wrote, "Thank you for giving me a second chance to do the right thing." That's when I realized something important. Retaliation doesn't always end in destruction. Sometimes it ends in redemption. The city council reached out next. They wanted to honor Teddy publicly. At first I refused. Attention had never been my motive. But Marcus insisted. "The world needs to see what real accountability looks like," he said. "Show them what happens when decency fights back." So I agreed. The ceremony took place at the newly renamed Teddy's Park, under a crisp blue sky. Kids played, cameras flashed, and the mayor spoke words that finally felt right. Today we recognize courage not just in service, but in standing up when silence would have been easier. Teddy wore a small vest with a medal pinned to it, City Service Award, Civilian Honor. He didn't care about medals. He just leaned against my leg like he always did, eyes soft, breathing steady. But I cared, because that medal wasn't just for him. It was for every invisible fighter who refuses to bow to corruption in their own neighborhood. After the speeches, Marcus clapped me on the shoulder. "You know," he said, "I think you found your next mission." "Retirement didn't stick anyway," I replied. He laughed. "Figures. You were never built for quiet." Maybe he was right. Maybe some of us aren't built to rest. We're built to restore. That night I sat on my porch again, the air finally calm. Teddy dozed beside me, head on my boot, snoring softly. Across the street, Mrs. Gable's porch light flickered on. She waved. I waved back. No fear, no fines, just peace. And for the first time, that word felt permanent, because HOA Karen had learned what every tyrant eventually does. Paper power crumbles when met with truth backed by law. The morning after the ceremony, I woke to quiet. Not the brittle quiet that comes from tension, but the kind that feels earned. The kind you only hear when justice has finally leveled the field. For months, Greenfield Meadows had been a battleground, a neighborhood of whispers, fines, and fear. Now it was just a street again. Lawns trimmed, kids laughing, wind moving soft through trees. No clipboards, no threats, just peace. I poured my coffee, stepped out to the porch, and found Teddy already sitting at attention, watching the sunrise as if he understood the significance. The light caught the metal on his vest and turned it gold. He tilted his head at me, waiting for the day to start, like nothing extraordinary had happened. Like we hadn't dismantled an empire of corruption one statute at a time. That was Teddy, the soldier who never needed glory, only purpose. Before we move forward, comment down from where you're watching right now. The community changed fast after Karen's downfall. The same residents who once looked away started talking again, reconnecting like a neighborhood reborn. The HOA's old logo was stripped from every sign. The city's temporary trustees finalized new bylaws, this time with transparency clauses, quarterly audits, and a standing liaison from the OMWSU, Department of Housing and Urban Development. They called it the Dalton Amendment. I hadn't asked for it, but it was fitting. A few months later, the new board, elected fairly, free from her grip, reached out. They wanted me to help review future policy. I declined. I wasn't interested in control. I'd had my war. What mattered now was peace. Permanent, enforceable peace. Karen's name became a warning, a story parents told when explaining what happens when arrogance meets accountability. Last I heard, she'd sold her house at a loss, moved out of state, and was spending her community service hours cleaning kennels at a local shelter. Irony has a sense of humor, but revenge wasn't the point. The point was the message that echoed far beyond our cul-de-sac, that no one, not even a homeowners association president, stands above federal law. The DOJ published an internal case memo citing Dalton versus Greenfield Meadows HOA as precedent for expedited ADA intervention in residential disputes. Legal reform, born from one act of cruelty in a quiet suburb. One afternoon, I got a letter. It wasn't from any agency or official. It was handwritten, shaky but deliberate. "Mr. Dalton," it read, "I saw what happened in your neighborhood. My husband is a veteran too, and our HOA has been trying to ban his therapy dog. Your story gave us courage. Thank you." I sat there for a while after reading it. Then I folded it carefully and placed it inside the same binder where it all began. Evidence had built that case, but faith, quiet, relentless faith, had finished it. By spring, the city unveiled the new park sign, Teddy's Park, dedicated to service, loyalty, and justice. Families gathered, kids played, and a local reporter asked if I'd say a few words. I'm not one for speeches, but I looked down at Teddy sitting by my side and figured he'd earned one. "I didn't win this fight alone," I said. "It was the law that won. The law and the people who finally believed it could protect them. We live in a country where even the smallest injustice, one act of cruelty, one misuse of power, can be challenged and overturned if someone's willing to stand up. So if you ever feel outnumbered, remember this. They only win if you stay silent." The crowd clapped. Kids cheered. Teddy barked once, soft and proud. The sound broke the tension like sunlight through fog. After the event, I walked the loop around the park's edge. The path wound past the flower beds where the community had planted roses for Mrs. Gable, a memorial bench for veterans, and a plaque for service animals of courage. The words below it were simple. For those who protect, seen and unseen. Marcus found me sitting there and handed me a folder. "Final paperwork," he said. "HUD closed the audit. You're officially cleared, compensated, and commended." I opened it, the city's seal, the DOJ letter, even a commendation, from the State Attorney General's office. "You turned a neighborhood feud into federal reform," Marcus said, grinning. "That's one hell of a retirement hobby." I smiled faintly. "Guess old habits die hard." He patted my shoulder. "You ever think about writing this down? The full thing? There are thousands who'd need it." I looked out across the park, watching Teddy chase a butterfly through the grass. "No need," I said. "They'll write it themselves, in every place someone refuses to back down." He nodded, and for a moment the world felt lighter. As dusk settled, I sat on that same bench, the last light fading over Teddy's park. The quiet wasn't empty anymore. It was full. Full of meaning, of redemption, of everything we'd fought for. I thought back to the question that started it all. How far will a man go to defend his own? Far enough to expose corruption. Far enough to turn fear into reform. Far enough to make sure no one ever has to fight that fight again alone. Teddy wandered back to me, tail wagging, tongue lolling. He pressed against my leg, eyes soft, the metal on his vest catching the dying light. I scratched behind his ear and whispered, "We did it, partner." He looked up like he understood. Maybe he did. Dogs have a way of knowing when the battle's over. I stayed there until the park lights came on, quiet, peaceful, watching the world move again. The sound of sprinklers, the faint laughter of kids, the hum of life restored. No threats, no fear. just the sound of home. Because in the end, justice didn't just save my service dog, it saved my community. And it reminded everyone who watched that the law, when wielded with truth, doesn't just punish, it heals. That's how tyrants fall. Not with rage, with evidence, with courage, with people who refuse to bow. And as I stood, stretching, Teddy trotted beside me, golden fur shimmering under the streetlights. The night was still, the mission complete. We walked home together, a soldier and his dog, no longer fighting for peace, but living in it,